All right, guys, gonna keep this very simple. First, I just want to thank Michael for coming on. If you haven't heard the past few intros, pretty much if you like this channel, if you like fantasy baseball, Michael is gonna be able to help you out way more than I can. And that's why I've been consistently annoying him, consistently bothering him, begging him to come on the Fantasy Flock Network. But he has so many other things going on, and I'm going to leave the link for all of those in the description of the video below. So if you like what he has to say, I advise you going down there to check out whatever he is doing. And also, I want to thank all of y'all as we are just continuing to grow the channel and we are closing in on 100 subscribers. This channel is growing a lot faster than I thought it would. So yeah, thank you for your support and thank you for Michael coming on. Let's get into the video. All right, let's try this again. I just completely butchered the intro. But Michael was telling me before we started recording that he has drafted 8 fantasy baseball teams already. And I think it'll be a great idea to go through and just cover some of the players that he's found himself drafting over and over and over again. Maybe it's only 2 or 3 times, whatever it is. I mean, if it's 2 times out of 8, that is a high ownership percentage. And we can talk about why Michael likes them in a certain range, why they fit into a certain type of roster construction, really whatever it is about the player. I have not heard a single one of these names, so I'm just kind of in it for the ride. So, Michael, how are you doing? And let's start it off with the first player.
The guy I have many shares of, at least 4, maybe more, is Yoan Mankata. I love Yoan Mankata this year. Forget about COVID. Forget about what you saw last year. 2019, he had one of the most historic BABIPs since World War II. It was ridiculous. It was a part of his game, though. So don't be like, whoa, the BABIP was out of control. That's why he hit for such a high average. No, that's part of his profile. He's an elite prospect, always has been. 2020, who cares about it? 2021, Yoan Mankata takes hold. He takes control of his destiny as one of the best, most talented players in the American League. And he's in a lineup that is fantastic. So I love me some Yoan Mankata, especially for third base, because you could take him and, ADP has been roughly anywhere from 80-ish, in the 80s, late 70s, and you could wait. I mean, I'd rather skip out on most of the third basemen, except Jose Ramirez. I would take Jose Ramirez, of course. But other than Jose Ramirez, I would wait and just take him later on, and he would be my number 1 guy, no doubt about it. Some other guys I've taken a lot. Sandy Alcantara is a guy I love for the Marlins. Starting pitcher you can get in the 120s, 130s, maybe 110s, depending on who takes him. But I love him because he's durable, reliable, and he's going to increase his Ks. His K percentage is just going to get better. He's going to reduce the walks, which he was already working on. This is the thing I said because I've loved him. I'll never forget the time Sandy Alcantara on the final day of the 2019 season won me a title. On the last day, he pitched a 9-inning complete game shutout against the Royals, and it's locked in my home league's title. I'll never forget that. And ever since then, I'm like, this is the guy that I know he can be. So I love him. I think he's a good value in 2021.
So are you finding yourself ever having to reach on him, or is it just a situation where you're like, you know what? I took him the first 2 or 3 drafts because he was just my guy. I was willing to go out there and reach on him, but after you get a share of him in a league, maybe 2 shares, then are you still that confident that you're willing to go and possibly take him either at his ADP or a little bit higher than his ADP in the next few drafts? Or was that just the case of, you know what? I mean, he fell to me maybe in these last 2, and then I ended up just not caring that I'd already drafted him in a couple spots and willing to go that route.
Yeah, I've always liked him regardless. I'll take him where he's going. I might jump on him depending on the aggression of the type of league I'm in. If there's like sharks and hardcore analysts in there, yeah, I might have to sneak up and take him. But if it's your run-of-the-mill league, he's generally available where he's been going. He's mixed in with like Chris Paddock and some other starting pitchers like Joe Musgrove. People love Joe Musgrove this year. He's in San Diego now, but I like Alcantara just as much. And in fact, all 3 Marlins starters, Alcantara, Pablo Lopez, and Sixto Sanchez, are right in the same grouping. And oftentimes you can get 2 or all 3 if you want. I do love the Marlins staff this year, but I definitely like Alcantara the most of those 3.
Okay, Michael, this is a complete ignorant question just because I don't know. Is it a strategy that people like to go through, and do they like to possibly stack pitchers in the same rotation, or is that just something that it doesn't matter, just get your guy?
Oh, it happens. Yeah. There's people who say draft all the Dodgers pitchers because either way, you're going to come out, smelling like roses. It's kind of classic football, fantasy football deal. Hey, I'm going to draft everybody on the Chiefs offense. It seems like a positive for you. You're going all in, and head to head is a lot different. It's a little more risky. But if you're talking roto for a full season of baseball, which is way longer than football, completely different games because football is once a week. You're all in. Drafting a staff is not a bad idea on a team that's going to be getting a lot of victories, especially if it's a league where wins are a category.
All right, well, let's hear someone else. I have to get at least a total of, let's call it 5 names from you. So give us a third guy that you just find yourself, maybe you've only taken them in 2 or 3 leagues. But like I said, I mean, out of 8 leagues you've drafted, 2 leagues, that's a 25% ownership percentage. That is right up there with pretty much where I like to be capped out if I'm playing in a high volume of leagues.
A guy have at least 3 shares of now is Steven Strasburg. Now, people are paranoid about the carpal tunnel, but surgery was a success, and he just threw a few times already, is throwing off the mound, looks good, feels good. Yes, Steven Strasburg has had other injuries as part of his checkered history, but he's still one of the elite pitchers in baseball. He can give you plenty of innings, and he can give you good ratios, great K ratios. He signed that mega deal, $245 million deal fairly recently coming into the 2020 season. So the Nationals are going to want to get some of the return on that. So I don't really buy into the fear of the carpal tunnel surgery being a problem. I'm very excited about him. I would also say I love Will Smith of the Dodgers. I have several shares of him. I don't like to draft catchers too high, but when I do, I'm going Will Smith right now. Will Smith is a guy who can really give you great return, and you're not stretching. He's a rare catcher to me where you're not losing out value because you're not taking other players based on where Will Smith's going, which is right around like 105 ADP-ish. So I love Will Smith. And I also like Gary Sanchez. That's another catcher who's going about 100 picks later. I believe Gary Sanchez will hit 35 home runs this year. Even if a ball is deadened, he's a guy who crushes a ball when he makes contact with it. Now, I know it's a matter of, hey, will he make contact with it? But I'm in a lot of 2-catcher leagues, and I love using Gary Sanchez as one of those because catcher is so thin. He could still give you a great advantage with a massive power potential.
Okay, Michael, I'm sorry, but let's go back in time. Let's bring up Steven Strasburg again. And I'll say, okay, so right now he's going as pitcher 26. So I'll say generally with these players that, at least in other sports, if they are just, I want to say, not necessarily going to be consistent with where their ADP value is. And let me explain that. And what I mean by not be consistent is you'd be surprised if Strasburg finishes the year as pitcher 26 and what you're expecting on a per game basis. Obviously, the reason he's going there is, like you said, people are worried about the downside of him just kind of plummeting down, but he does have the upside where he could jump up and just say finish in the top 10 quite easily. I mean, that is something you could see. So generally, when those players have that wide range of outcomes, at least in other sports, what I like to tend to do is I like to make sure that we are loading up on a player like that at a position that we already have a few guys at. So maybe are you finding yourself drafting him after you've already taken 2 pitchers and he's your third guy going, you know what? If he hits his 90th percentile outcome, then he comes out and I possibly win the league. Whereas if he doesn't, if everybody is worrying and they are correct about it, then who cares? He was my third pitcher, probably wasn't going to win the league anyway. So what do you find yourself here? Are you generally taking him as your first, second, third, fourth guy? I don't know. Just let me know what you think about that little ramble.
Well, that's smart. That's a good call on your part, Mason. I don't disagree with that, but I actually took him as my number 1 starting pitcher in the most recent draft I've been doing for my podcast. We have podcast listener leagues. We have 3 different leagues for an overall trophy. And in the league I'm in, I took him as my SP1. Now that's more risky, I admit, but if he pops back into where he should be as a top 15 starting pitcher, it's top 20 at worst, then I'm cool with that. And I'm going to be doing just fine. The key to winning fantasy baseball, in my opinion, is not being too risky, but knowing the trends and understanding what a player's value truly is. And if you can see that more than other people can see that, you can leap on other players early on, knowing that you can count on a guy that other people are dismissing to give you exactly what you need. So I think that's an important thing. Other leagues, I did draft a pitcher before him. He was my number 2 or my number 3. But on that one league, he was my number 1. And we'll see if that ends up being more risky. But yes, there are other teams where I drafted Luis Castillo or Max Scherzer first, his partner, his teammate, which is also maybe slightly risky.
Okay, well, I'll say this isn't going to apply to anybody watching this video right now, probably. But that one league that you drafted him as your first pitcher, I mean, that makes a ton of sense in that format. If it's a 3-league podcast league where the overall champion of all 3 leagues gets one prize, I mean, if that's a tournament style, then of course you're willing to go with all the risk just for the ultimate upside. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes a ton of sense in that scenario.
But I also backed him up with Kyle Hendricks right after on the very next pick, who was very durable and reliable. So that is also an important part of the puzzle. It's not like just we went, okay, well, Strasburg's our guy. No, the very next pick, we took Hendricks because I love Kyle Hendricks this year. He can always give you a lot of innings. He's durable, reliable. He may not be as flashy as other players, but his rates, whip, very good whip. Not an elite K guy necessarily, but a little better than you might think.
Awesome. Well, if there's one guy from this list that you think you are going to continue drafting, you don't care how many shares you get for how many leagues you play, who is that going to be? I mean, if you just had to pinpoint one guy that you're like, I don't care if I have him in 75% of my leagues, I am fine with it.
That'd probably be Mankata.